Welcome to Ethiopia, your second home. As you gather for the 48th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council and the 39th Ordinary Session of the AU Assembly, the vibrant city of Addis Ababa opens its arms to you. This year, leaders from across the continent unite under the powerful theme, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. Together, we embark on a journey of meaningful discourse and shared visions for a brighter future. But it's not just about discussions within these esteemed halls. As you can see, the streets of Addis Ababa are alive with transformation, all ready to welcome you. Don't miss the iconic Adwa Victory Memorial, a symbol of resilience and pride commemorating Africa's triumph over colonialism. It stands as a testament to the determination of a people ready to defend their sovereignty. Once again, a very warm welcome to Addis Ababa, a city in motion and a destination that feels like home. Together, let's shape the future.
The 39th AU Summit, which commences today, February 14, 2026, will focus on peace, security, economic integration via African Continental Free Trade Area, sustainable agriculture, climate resilience, digital progress, human development, and strengthening partnerships to promote stability, growth, and Africa's global influence. Today we are going to bring to you the event of the AU Summit as it happens at the headquarters of the African Union. And of course, our reporters from different places in Addis Ababa will bring these events to you. And I, Gamachi Samandida, and my colleague, Barakat Sisai, will bring these events as they happen exactly in real time to you. Thank you very much for joining us and stay tuned. Hello, Barakat.
Hello, Gamachi.
Yeah, well, this grand event is taking place in Addis Ababa. And of course, it will happen for 2 days, today and tomorrow. The 14th of February and the 15th.
Yep.
And this morning on my way here, I've observed Addis Ababa is more than ever ready to host, this grand event. And of course, our roads are so clean and beautiful. Our traffic police are very alert. And the vehicles, of course, the leaders, the vehicles, on which, we have the leaders, they are escorted by police motor bicycles. And I could see that, of course, Addis Ababa is really taking, this event so seriously. And the Ethiopian government is paying due attention to any event, that happens around, just this wonderful event. And let's begin with what we expect, during this summit, the 39th AU Summit. Well, important thematic agenda items, I think, have already been identified by the leaders. And as far as I know, peace and security, integration, and Africa's voice are to be echoed or addressed, during this summit. And if we begin with peace and security, of course, peace and security is something that we cannot ignore because it is the basis for every development endeavor that we aspire to secure. And of course, the theme, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems, is the theme of this summit. But again, these thematic agenda are very much related to ensuring, of course, the theme. Assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems can be possible when we have peace and security in the African continent. The African continent is, of course, as we have always been saying, endowed with, water resources. We have abundant water resources, both in the form of rain and, of course, beneath the ground. We have a lot of water. But for various reasons, one of which is, of course, peace and security, Africa could not be able to harness this resource. So what do you say about these relevance of these thematic agenda items.
Thank you very much, Gamachis. As you have already mentioned in your introductory, we do expect that a lot of discussion points to be on the table for the African Union heads of state and government to discuss today's at the AU headquarters, which is based in Addis. And as we have also known that this the African Union Heads of State and the Government Summit is actually follows the 48th organization of the Executive Council of the African Union. They deliberate on some of the continental priorities, which is ranging from the peace and security, that of the economic integration, and finally on the global voice of the African Union and the African continent at the global arena, the global stage as well. And as you have mentioned, this year's the 39 AU Summit is going to focus on 3 thematic areas. The first one is peace and security. As we have said, this is the elephant in the house. I mean, the big issue that we cannot, deny it. There are some challenge when it comes to peace and security in Africa. We have, this is a kind of problem that we can't transcend it so far, based on the information that we have and based on the experience that we have also in this continent as well. And the other most important thing is the integration, the continental integration, which is very much related to, the African continental free trade areas. We all know that this the African continental free trade area has begun to affect since 2021, and we have seen some progress on that scale as well. And this leader also expected to discuss about some of the challenge related to the implementation of the Africa continental free trade areas and some of the success as well. And they would also expect to put some sort of direction on how to facilitate the implementation of this the single market agenda of the Africa Union. And the other most important thing is the global participation of the African Union on, or we can call it like the African countries or the continent as well. And we have seen some progress in this frontier as well. Like some African countries has been voicing like the concerns of the continent, the concerns of the African Union as well. And even the organization, the institution, the African Union also played an important role at the global stage as well. Like one of the case in point is the Group of 20 or the G20 summit. And we all know that this summit was held last year in South Africa, Johannesburg. That was actually a historic summit since it was happening in the African soil for the first time. So this is a big thumbs up for the African Unions and the African countries as well, because many African countries are actually trying their best to make the continent agenda, the continent interest at the mainstreams of the global discussion, like either in the political or the economic discussion as well. So these are like the 3 thematic areas that these leaders, the African leaders, are expected to discuss about in today's the 39th organization of the African Unions. But apart from that, there are also other issues, other like subsidiary issues that we do expect from these leaders to discuss about. For example, one of this big agenda is going to be the water and sanitation. And this year theme is like water availability and safe sanitation system to achieve the goal of Agenda 2063. And as you can understand from like the theme by itself, it is a deliberate political decisions, because there is an enthusiasm from the African Union's member states as well, in terms of just underscoring the urgency of linking water with development, water with peace and security as well. As you have said, without like making sure of the availability of waters, we can't have like a peace, because in Africa, like water is it's a source of tension as well. It's a source of contention among African countries as well. It's also a contention among like communities as well. It's a contention between the groups as well. So there has to be some policies, strategies that we have to devise or deploy in order to have a cooperative spirit when it comes to just how to utilize this water resource in Africa context as well. So water is not, is not a technical issue as well. It's not particularly responsible for specific sectoral issues. It is a multi-sectoral issue as well. Its issue is a very like transcending one. It's related to like the agriculture. It's related to the development of the continent as well. So there has to be a holistic and a comprehensive approach on how to utilize this the African water resource as well. So this is going to be one of the bigger agenda for the African heads of state and governments in today's discussion, I think.
Yes, Barakat, allow me to speak on this, of course. Institutional reforms is, something that this summit is going to address, because if we look at, Africa's challenges so far, funding for its projects, for example, utilizing water resources require, a lot of finance. And for this, Africa has been, as a continent, or many African countries, have been relying on, external sources of finance. And this time, reliance on these external forces cannot be, reliable. Cannot continue for quite too long. And Africa needs, solution for this. And when you reform, financial institutions, when you make, reforms to African financial institutions, then there is likely, to have solution for this gap. And the African Development Bank reform is, one of the issues that this summit is expected to address, because the implementation of the African Union Continental Financial Institutions, in this case, the African Development Bank reform, is, something that this summit cannot ignore, because it improves funding and reduce reliance on external donors. And the other thing is, of course, again, the first agenda, which is, peace and security. The African Union needs involvement in this regard, and peacekeeping forces for quick intervention in crisis areas. Many African regions, east, west, south, central, they are affected by instability. There is, lack of peace for various reasons. And the African Union, as a grand institution, is expected to address, just these issues. And so the institutions, that have been dealing with the provision of, finance for the African development endeavors, that, for example, lends, money for African countries, need to make, some reforms in order to address, just the challenges that African countries are facing these days. And operational improvements, in peacekeeping. The African Union also need to involve its institutions, existing institutions, make, reform to them, so that there will be, better deployment of any activity that is, desirable, any activity that is proper. For example, African Union may send, peacekeeping forces in places where you have conflicts. We have conflicts in West Africa and Central Africa, in the Horn of Africa. There are, again, terrorist groups, that affect, just the peace and the stability in these regions. And African Union, as a grand institution, as a regional institution, cannot ignore, just these activities by terrorists. And for this, more than ever, there must be, a new approach to this situation. And the other one is, of course, Africa's, global engagement. Africa, despite the fact that, it has the resources, it has, of course, the capacity to influence, the rest of the world economically. Its political position has been, as we know, very low. And globally, Africa's engagement has been very minimal. And this time, this particular summit, the 39th AU summit, is expected to enhance the involvement of the African continent in global stage. For example, G20 is one of the good examples that shows how it matters. The last time when South Africa hosted the G20 summit, we have observed how it affected, for good, for the better, the African continent's involvement, because South Africa's G20 presidency, which saw Africa, advocating for fairer global economic policies, such as debt relief, initiatives and reforms in global trade rules, was appreciated by many African countries, and it really changed, the way the G20 countries and Africa in general have been, related. So as of now, Africa could see how it matters when you have, better position in global institutions such as, just the G20. So in this particular summit, again, the involvement of Africa in global stages is likely to be heightened, likely to be echoed, and so that measures are expected to be made by African leaders in order to ensure that Africa will have a better place in global stages. Yeah, and especially, African Union's push for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. Many African countries, of course, have been pressing for having, a better position in the Security Council, the UN Security Council. And Africa also, of course, had, some support from other countries so that, it will have a better place in the UN Security Council. So these pushes will be, I hope, intensified, just during this AU summit.
Yep. You're right, Gamuchis. Just to add on, like what you have already mentioned, like the last one, like the African voice at the global level. I think this is one of the long overdue question of the African countries and the African Union in general. I mean, like reforming the international financial institutions, reforming the United Nations Security Council as well. It's like the two big things that's going to be discussed at the Ordinary 39th Ordinary Session of the African Union Summit, which is going to begin shortly here in Addis. And like the African continent has been like calling for the reform of the United Nations Security Council for Africa to have at least 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council with veto power. Of course, there has been some push from other like countries outside of the continent. I mean, they're actually creating some sort of hurdle in terms of, I mean, like not to have Africa like a permanent seat with the veto power. Some are actually agreed to have Africa to have a permanent seat, but they are actually not satisfied with like the request of having a veto power. But African countries are saying that without a veto power, this is like, it's just nothing, So we need to have like a decision-making power at the seats, like in the Security Council, like most of the discussion actually revolve around Africa. Most of the peace support, which is actually authorized by or deployed by the United Nations, is actually in the continent, and some of the discussion are actually focused on the African continents. But on the table, the African voice, the African interest hasn't been, like on the table. So there has been like a glaring marginalization of the African concern. The African side has always been sidelined. So African continent, the African countries has been calling on the United Nations Security Council to reform in a way that can accommodate the interest and the agendas of the African countries as well. When it comes to the financial institutions, of course, for example, if you talk about the perceived risk premium in Africa is very much high. This is because like this, the credit rating agency are actually deploying like a methodologies which is not actually taking into consideration some of the material reality on the ground. And most of the times, like the credit rating agencies, like the big 3, like the Modi, the Fitch, and S&P, they always have like this generalized kind of rating against the African countries, both the institution at the same time the sovereign rating or the measurement tactics that they have been deploying. African countries are actually like calling these institutions to reform their methodologies, to reform their approach toward African countries, unless otherwise the risk premium regarding Africa is going to remain the same. And investors outside of the continent are not actually just preferring Africa as an investment destination. Like any investors who has the chance to come to Africa, they always see like the risk. Of course, risk is everywhere, but the risk which is actually like measured by this credit rating agency should reflect or properly reflect the material reality on the ground. And some of the ratings doesn't really reflect the fundamentals of the economies of these African countries as well. And African countries are actually looking for like an African representation at these financial institutions, at this credit rating agency as well. And the other important things when it comes to the reform of the financial institution is like the accessibility of the African countries to the global liquidities, the finance. Of course, we know that like most of the capitals that is coming outside of the continent is actually coming from this financial institution like the IMF, the World Bank, and you name it. And this external financing has been like creating some sort of hurdle on the African continent because the cost of borrowing is very much high. And this is actually very much related to the credit rating situation of the African countries. But African countries are actually calling these institutions to reduce the cost of borrowing for the African countries because it really creates a hurdle, at the same time burden on the African countries. When you date something or when you borrow something, it's the burden is on you. And when the interest rate is very high, it's going to be very difficult for the African countries to get back the money that they borrowed from this financial institution.
Yes, Barakat, excuse me. Let me pause you here.
Yeah.
Well, these global financial institutions such as, the IMF, the World Bank,
Yep.
of course, they lend, billions of dollars to African countries. But they do that on the basis of, some requirements that favor these institutions than, the African countries who borrow, just the money.
Yeah.
And when these African countries, attempt or when they put effort, to pay their debts, most of the time the resources that they have is raw material. They don't have, products, industrial products, that they can bring to the world market to sell, with good price. And these prices are already set by, these financial institutions because they are just raw materials, no value added, little value added to the exports of these African countries. Now, until you will be able to fully pay, what you owe to these financial institutions, it takes quite, too long. And there is, this interest, which is, as you said earlier, the borrowing is very expensive and the interest rate is very high. And the products, these African countries bring to the world market is mostly, not value added too. It's just raw material. And just imagine, how much bulk of raw materials you are required to bring to the world market to be able to pay your debts. Now, there is, imbalance, financial imbalance between, these global institutions and African countries. So this has to change. Yes. And of course, African leaders in the past have always been, echoing this, the fact that, there must be a balanced relationship between these global financial institutions and respective African countries. And how do you ensure that, you'll be heard so that, you can solve this problem? Of course, if African leaders, treat the case, separately, it is very unlikely that, they will be successful. And this summit, gives them a chance to unite and then, to have a framework to deal with these kinds of challenge. And when they face, these financial institutions together, yeah. They can, they can resist. That maybe they'll be able to make a difference, but it's yeah. not an easy task. Yep. The influence of the World Bank, the influence of IMF is so huge that leave alone, separate African countries, collectively, the continent as a whole, as one body, finds it still difficult to address.
Yeah, the question is like specifically related to the cost of borrowing is very much high. And the African concern is like we need to be treated as equal as other countries, Like there is, the common expression, we are like a duck, we act like a duck, we croak like a duck, we walk like a duck, but we are told that we are not a duck, The question is like we need to be treated as equal as other countries who are actually member of these international financial institutions, Like African countries are not just gaining, like an equal share when it comes to just access to the borrowing at the international levels.
Yes, Barakat, let me pause you again. Okay, no excuse me. Viewers, our reporters from different places, different sites in Addis Ababa are ready to bring to us the events of the AU Summit as it happens at the headquarters. And of course, we have reporters around the Adwa, and around Mexico, Africa Union Road, and they're going to tell us what's going on regarding this AU summit. Stay tuned.
Good morning, everyone. We're here in the vibrant heart of Addis Ababa, right outside the Adwa Victory Museum, an incredible symbol of Ethiopia's resilience and triumph. Just a few moments ago, ministers, heads of state, and global leaders passed by here on their way to the African Union headquarters for the summit. Standing tall, right next to the statue of Emperor Minilik II, the museum is more than just a striking piece of architecture. It is a living tribute to Ethiopia's victory in the 1896 Battle of Adwa. The Battle of Adwa marked a rare and decisive victory of an African nation over European colonial forces, a moment that reshaped global perceptions of Africa and inspired liberation movements across the continent and beyond. It is a reminder that history isn't written by the victors of colonialism. It is a reminder that victory isn't written by the victors of colonialism, but by those who fought for their freedom. Inaugurated in February 2024, the museum highlights Ethiopia's defiance and strategic brilliance in the face of colonial forces. It's not just a national monument, it's a beacon for Pan-Africanism, showing the world what African unity and resilience look like. With a capacity for 2,500 people, this museum will become the heart of Pan-African discourse, connecting the historical victory of Adwa to today's ongoing struggle for self-determination and sovereignty. As the leaders go past us today, it's a powerful reminder of what this place represents, a legacy of ambition, strength, and an unyielding commitment to self-reliance. Just like the Sebastopol Monument, where Tewodros II's cannon symbolizes a bold stand for Ethiopian sovereignty, the Adwa Victory Museum tells a story of courage, innovation, and an unbroken spirit. The history here isn't just etched into walls, it lives in the movement of people who fought and continue to fight for a brighter, more united Africa. And as these African leaders pass by on their way to the African Union Summit, it's impossible not to think about how far we've come and the work still ahead. This place isn't just a museum, it's a testament to our shared history and vision for the future. Back to you in the studio.
Welcome to Ethiopia, your second home. As you gather for the 48th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council and the 39th Ordinary Session of the AU Assembly, the vibrant city of Addis Ababa opens its arms to you. This year, leaders from across the continent unite under the powerful theme, assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. Together, we embark on a journey of meaningful discourse and shared visions for a brighter future. But it's not just about discussions within these esteemed halls. As you can see, the streets of Addis Ababa are alive with transformation, all ready to welcome you. Don't miss the iconic Adwa Victory Memorial, a symbol of resilience and pride commemorating Africa's triumph over colonialism. It stands as a testament to the determination of a people ready to defend their sovereignty. Once again, a very warm welcome to Addis Ababa, a city in motion and a destination that feels like home. Together, let's shape the future.
The 39th Ordinary Session of the African Union Assembly is going to deliberate on various crucial and critical issues of the continent. And I can see that African head of states and governments have already arrived here at the African Union headquarters, located in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly is, of course, going to be conducted under the theme Assuring Sustainable Water Availability and Safe Sanitation Systems to Achieve the Goals of Agenda 2063. The Assembly of the African Union is, by the way, a decisive supreme decision-making organ of the African Union. It's basically comprised of African head of states and governments, mainly prime ministers and presidents of 55 African countries, member countries of the African Union. And they shape decisions and they shape policies and they address continental challenges and problems. And the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly will deliberate on various critical issues such as peace and security, economic integration, sustainable development, and African Union's engagement and participation at G20 and African Union's institutional reform. By the way, these are issues and agendas set by the Executive Council of the African Union. As we do remember, the 48th ordinary session of the Executive Council of the African Union was conducted here in Addis Ababa over the past few days, here in Addis Ababa, the political and diplomatic capital of Africa. And the Executive Council of the African Union has, suggested various issues for the Assembly of the African Union. And some of the issues are related with peace and security, for example. Peace and security is really a core agenda to be deliberated on during the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly, which is being conducted today and tomorrow. The violences, the wars, the conflicts have undermined peace and stability, political stability and development in the continent. The war in Sudan, South Sudan, and Democratic Republic of Congo. For example, the crisis, the war, the civil war in Sudan is one of the most devastating conflict in the whole world, and the warring sides, the war between the two conflicting parties, the Sudan armed forces and the rapid support forces, is still going on. And recent statistics and data show that close to 14 million people of Sudan have been displaced, and millions of people are in acute need of humanitarian assistance and basic needs such as food. So the situation in Sudan is really dire. And of course, the crisis in Sudan is the most forgotten conflict in the whole world. So the 39th ordinary session of the Assembly of the African Union will deliberate, will spotlight this Sudan civil war during its deliberation and discussion, which is being conducted today and tomorrow. And there are, of course, crises in other parts of the continent, such as in Democratic Republic of Congo, in South Sudan. So the peace and security of the continent is the core agenda for African Union Assembly, for the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly of the African Union. And there is also terrorism, terrorist crisis in Africa. There are enormous terrorist organizations such as Al-Shabaab, ISIS, and Boko Haram. For example, Boko Haram, which is operating in the northeastern part of Nigeria, is committing various heinous crimes in that country. And of course, it's also spreading its reach beyond borders of Nigeria. And there are also other terrorist groups such as Al-Shabaab, which is based in Eastern Africa, although the base of the Al-Shabaab, the terrible terrorist group, is in Somalia. It is waging insurgencies across Eastern Africa, and it's also attacking African Union forces as well. And it's undermining peace and stability in the Eastern African region of Africa. And of course, it is undermining economic integration and trade between and among countries of Eastern Africa. And there is also another terrorist organization in the continent, ISIS. We do remember that ISIS was first erupted in Middle East, in Iraq and Syria, but now it has significantly been diminished and reduced. But in a surprising fashion, in a very surprising manner, this terrible terrorist organization, ISIS, is spreading and expanding in the continents of Africa. So terrorism is going to be at the core agenda of the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly. There are other issues as well, and global and continental leaders are going to deliver important speeches during the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly. And the Pulse of Africa, the Pan-African Media Institution, will highlight you the major speeches delivered during the 39th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly, which is going to be kicked off this morning. Stay tuned.
Africa, Shashiati, Let's of Africa, Africati, Let's of Africa, Shashiati, Let's of Africa, Sudanima, Let's of Africa, Rikamana, Let's of Africa, Shashiati, Let's of Africa, Sudanima, Let's of Africa, Africati, Let's of Africa, Shashiati, Let's of Africa, Africati, Let's of Africa, Shashiati, Let's of Africa.
نعم، أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم مشاهدينا الأعزاء في هذه التغطية المباشرة على قناة POA عربي نبض إفريقيا من مقر الاتحاد الإفريقي من العاصمة الإثيوبية أديس أبابا، حيث تتجه الأنظار بعد قليل إلى انطلاق أعمال القمة الاتحاد الإفريقي أو إلى انطلاق أعمال قمة التاسعة والثلاثين للاتحاد الإفريقي على مستوى رؤساء الدول الأفارقة، والتي تستمر على مدى يومين. وتأتي هذه القمة تحت شعار ضمان توافر المياه بشكل مستدام وأنظمة صرف صحي آمنة لتحقيق أهداف أجندة إفريقيا 2063. ومن المنتظر أو من المتوقع أن يبحث القادة الأفارقة خلال هذه القمة ملفات يعني محورية، وفي مقدماتها تعزيز السلم والأمن وحل النزاعات التي تحدث في القارة الإفريقية، ودفع تنفيذ منطقة تجارة القارة الحرية الإفريقية، وتعميق الاندماج الاقتصادي إلى جانب الإصلاح المؤسسي والحوكمة ومواجهة تداعيات التغير المناخي، فضلا عن وضع قضية المياه والصرف الصحي في صدارة الأولويات التنموية في القارة. هذه القمة تتوج مسارا تحضيريا شمل اجتماعات المندوبين الدائمين ووزراء الخارجية لتصل إلى قمة القادة الإفريقية التي ستصدر عنها قرارات وتوجهات استراتيجية تسهم في رسم ملامح العمل الإفريقي المشترك في المرحلة المقبلة. فابقوا معنا على هذه التغطية المباشرة من قناة POA عربي نبض إفريقيا لنوافيكم بأبرز مجريات التي ستحدث وستطرح خلال القمة أولا بأول من مقر الاتحاد الإفريقي من العاصمة الإثيوبية أديس أبابا.
Don't tell your story, it will be told by others. They'll talk of hunger, they'll talk of war, they'll talk of conflict, but they'll not say the things that are happening in Africa that are positive.
This is POA, a very new media organization in Ethiopia.
We have to be voice for ourselves. There is no one else that can tell our story better than us.
If it's defending African matters, then go for it. Go for Pulse Media.
This is the Pulse of Africa. Tune in, follow the journey, and learn about the news and what's shaping our African continent.
I am really impressed by the work that they are doing by telling the African story from Africa for Africans. I think it's definitely needed.
Please subscribe to the Pulse of Africa on all platforms.
Viewers, we're back to you, and our reporters have, of course, brought to you the events as they happen exactly at the AU headquarters, and they've shared us what has been deliberated on security and other major reports. Well, Barakat, I think we earlier stopped talking about finance and these financial institutions, how they of course affect Africa as a continent and what Africa should be doing to address, just this challenge.
I mean, the question is, like as I've said, the African countries are not actually treated as equal as countries outside of the continent, while they have similarity of economic fundamentals. This is, I think, one of the structural challenges that African countries are actually facing whenever they engage, whenever they deals with these financial institutions. That's why the African countries are actually calling for the reform of this institution as well. When you look at the external finance, or the finance which is coming out of the outside of the continent, it is very much limited, and most of the times the African countries are actually depend on their reserves, like the foreign reserve, their foreign currency reserves, or sometimes they access some sort of loan, some sort of like maybe grants from the IMF based on the quota, as we all know that. And there has been also some call from the African countries. These quotas are not actually like reflect the material reality on the ground. You know, it needs to be redefined, recalibrated with the context that the African countries are actually in. Unless otherwise, this financial resources will not come here and at the same time fits to the developmental needs of the African countries. And I think this issue is going to be one of the major, discussion points for the African countries at the summit, and we do expect some sort of a direction, you know, or roadmap on how to realize this goal in terms of just enhancing the African countries' accessibility to the global liquidity, the global financial resources. So, you know, some African countries are actually working by themselves, like unilaterally. But the issue is like, the problem is it's a common challenge. You know, it's a common problem. There has to be a common stance on that one, and the African Union do expect to lead the spearhead in terms of just paving the way for African countries to have, an open discussion with these financial institutions and to have solved these problems as well.
Yes, Barakat, but it's not an easy task for African leaders because obviously these financial institutions, they have had, a very predatory approach to African countries. And what are expected from African leaders right now to change, to curb, just this direction? Well, one of the things that African leaders at this moment need to, of course, implement is that they need to unite. They need to have, a strong voice. And when they, of course, gear their voices, towards one path, when they converge, their voices, and when they come together, when they agree on the terms, to deal with these global financial institutions, they could have, of course, some kind of power to influence them. Otherwise, if separately, if this issue is, treated separately by African countries, I don't think they will be successful. Yep. So unity of African leaders at this moment is very important.
Just to add on what you have said, for example, if you look at the debt restructuring or the debt relief, for example, in the G20, there is a common framework to address some of the debt burden of the African countries, and we have also the Paris Club as well. And most of the discussion is actually revolve around on how to address this challenge. But some African countries, or maybe like this, the lenders, maybe like the institutions or the sovereign as well, they try to address this challenge like unilaterally. So the African unions and the African countries, that is a time for them to say, like, we have to have like a common approach whenever there is like a debt restructuring, a debt relief for the African countries.
Barakat, don't you think there is a double standard by, for example, the rich countries when they lend, finance to various countries? Mm-hmm. If you take, G20 member states, when some of them, want to borrow from the institutions, and when African countries, want to borrow, the same finance, do you think they are treated equally?
I don't think.
And in the same way?
I think this is like actually one of the major challenge. I have said it earlier. Like African countries are not actually treated as equal as countries outside of the continent, while they have, similar economic fundamentals. Like as I have said, like there's a common expression. Like we are like a duck. We walk like a duck. We croak like a duck, but we are told that we are not a duck. So this is, I think, the major challenge. So what needs to be look like a duck? They might tell you that you have to have this phase or something like this one. But I think the question is like the perspective need to be, change once and for all. And this perspective is actually managed from the credit rating agency, approach to the African countries. They usually assign a low sovereign credit rating to the African countries, and the risk premium is very high. That's why the cost of borrowing is very high, and these financial institutions are not willing to avail loans or grants to the African countries because they have a fear that these countries may not be willing to return the amount of money that they borrowed from the financial institutions. Even they actually fear that whether these African countries do have the capacity to return back the money that they have. And well, just to add on this one, the credit rating agency, the global credit rating agency, specifically the three one, because the rest are not actually that much, working or operational at the Africa levels. I'm talking about or referring to the Fitch, the Moody, and S&P. Whenever they rate the African countries, they usually overemphasizes the political risk, the political crisis that African country has been grappling with. Of course, we have a peace and security challenge in African continent, but it doesn't mean that the African countries cannot override these problems. Of course, we do have also some, long-term promise of development as well. African countries are actually calling to these financial institutions to strike a balance between the risk, at the same time, the promise of development as well. Unless otherwise they strike a balance between these two important elements, the African country will not have any kind of equal footnotes with other countries. I think this is
yes, Barakat. Viewers, we would like to take you to our reporters situated in different parts of Addis Ababa, specifically Mexico Square and the African Union headquarters and Adwa Museum. Let's follow them and we'll be back to you.
Good morning from Mexico Street, Addis Ababa. As you can understand from the name, this place was named honoring the country Mexico after Mexico being the only 5 country that did not support the Italian annexation of Ethiopia during the Italo-Ethiopian War from 1936 to 1941. Now this place is going under huge transformation in which the Ethiopian government has been working for about 2 years under the theme of Addis Ababa Corridor Project. And for years, African leaders have been passing through this Mexico Square in their journey heading to the African Union headquarters. And that is what's happening today on the 39th ordinary sessions of the AU Summit. Now we expect the leaders to negotiate, discuss, and make decisions that would affect every citizen across Africa. And their arrival will tell us where priority lies this year, which topics are going to be discussed, and how our regional leaderships and continental leaderships coping up with the different regional problems, conflicts, and elections across the continent. The key pillar points in which the leaders are expected to be discussing will be peace and security, youth employment and empowerment, children and women, and the economic integration across the continent. Now, before we conclude, let's say a little bit about Agenda 2063 and the 39th AU Summit being different from the rest. Agenda 2063 was first implied by 2013 and it was adopted by 2015. So Agenda 2063 is classified into 10-year different phases. And what makes this year very significant is that Africa will be moving from the 10-year plan to the second phase, which will be that the leaders will not only be discussing and negotiating like other times, but this time they'll also be telling us which topics have been implemented into action and which still remains as aspiration. And now, as always, Pulse of Africa will be your trusted media to tell you everything what's happening and who is saying what inside the AU quarter walls, live to our audiences. I am Magdalite Naga from Pulse of Africa, right here in Mexico, Addis Ababa, and make sure to stay tuned.
His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellency Mohammed Mustafa, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, former heads of states here present, our honorable First Ladies present here in this hall, Excellency Selma Malika Hadidi, Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Excellencies, Ministers, Excellencies, Commissioners, and the entire leadership of the African Union, Excellencies, Honorable Ambassadors and permanent representatives of member states of the African Union and international partners. His Excellency Fatala, the Director General of the African Union Commission, heads of organs and specialized agencies of the African Union, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of regional economic communities, Excellencies, heads of specialized institutions of the United Nations and international organizations here present. Excellencies, heads of African financial institutions, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Good morning to you all. It is an immense pleasure for me to welcome you here to the opening ceremony of the 39th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of State, taking place here today at the headquarters of the African Union in Addis Ababa, the capital of Africa. This session, which is a very important one, is the first of its kind since the election of the new leadership of the African Union Commission last year, February 2025. This offers an opportunity for constructive discussions on the progress made so far. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the program of our opening ceremony will be as follows. First and foremost, we are going to listen to the statements that will be made respectively by His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssouf, His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, His Excellency Mohamed Mustafa, His Excellency Her Excellency Giorgia Meloni, and His Excellency João Manuel Goncalves. These statements will be followed by the announcement of the Bureau of the Assembly of the African Union for the year 2026. And in this vein, His Excellency João Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola and the outgoing Chairperson of the African Union, will make his handing over statement as the outgoing chair of the African Union. And after that, His Excellency Evariste Ndayishimiye, President of the Republic of Burundi, the incoming AU chairperson, will also make his own acceptance statement. And these statements, Your Excellencies, will be followed by the presentation and the launch of the African Union theme of the year 2026, that is, guarantee the sustainable availability of water and health systems to meet the objectives of Agenda 2063. That said, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor and pleasure to invite His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssouf, Chairperson of the AU Commission, to make his opening statement.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Excellence.
Excellency João Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola and Chair of the African Union, Excellency Dr. Abiy Mohamed, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, Excellency Giorgia Meloni, President of Italy, and Honorable Mustafa, Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, UN Secretary General, representatives of Pan-African institutions, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to wish you a very happy New Year 2026. I also want to wish you all a warm welcome to the African Union, especially the newly elected heads of state. Permit me also to congratulate and thank President Lourenço of Angola for his chairship of the Union in 2025, which has given a new fillip to our continental agenda. The 39th summit of the African Union, ladies and gentlemen, is based on the theme water and sanitation, which is key to our economies and which is a collective good which should be a source of peace and cooperation among nations. Our summit is taking place against the backdrop of a crisis in the world and on the continent and in the world. And our policy of silencing the gun is far from becoming a reality. And the open or latent conflicts are chronic. Unconstitutional change of government is also reminds us of the obscure post-independence period. The change in the international order significantly impacts the affairs of the continent without forgetting the interference in our affairs by externalities. Multilateralism is sorely tested, and we are witnessing the emergence of unilateralism and protectionism. In the face of these, Africa should scale up its cooperation through the enhancing of its integration and cooperation programs. Pan-African institutions should intensify their efforts and determination. ASCFTA, Outer NEPAD, Africa CDC, and other mechanisms of African Union should work together. We request African financial institutions, AFC, the African Development Bank, and Afrexim Bank to work together. Ladies and gentlemen, regional economic communities also have to scale up their operations. By 2050, Africa should be able to rival with the major economies. Agenda 2063 should guide us towards the Africa that we want, a strong, autonomous, and prosperous Africa. These are not pious wishes, but an imperative for survival. And the major countries in the world are preparing for the polarization of this world. Africa is in the global south, but Africa has its own hallmark and its own identity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the reform of the institution should continue. The mobilization of domestic resources to finance the programs of the continent is not an option. It's urgent in the face of external tariffs. Our youth on the continent are impatient, and our women want more equality. Our civil society is positioning itself. So it's crucial to expedite the industrialization of the continent and the transformation of agriculture. And that will only be possible if we develop the energy potential of Africa and also create the necessary infrastructure. These are the prerequisites for the economic development of the continent expected. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the projects are complex and many. And we also know the challenges. You are confronted with these challenges on a daily basis in your respective countries. The African Union Commission, which I heard, will spare no efforts to advance this agenda. This is a long-term work, and we need to ensure that our action is sustainable. The 5-year 2022-2028 plan has been launched. The Agenda 2023 decade should be characterized by a high level of performance and execution. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's also important to focus on the suffering of our people, victims of war, injustice, displacement, and we cannot avoid their daily challenges. From the Sudan to the Sahel, to the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and elsewhere, our people continue to bear the brunt of instability. In the Middle East, Palestine, so the suffering of Palestinians also calls on us to act. The suffering of people should cease. International law and international humanitarian law are the basis of the international community. Preserving and promoting them will be the only pathway to ensuring peace in the world. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you every success in your deliberation. Thank you.
Che le vostre deliberazioni abbiano successo nei prossimi giorni. Grazie. Merci, Votre Excellence.
Thank you, Excellency, and we warmly welcome the Prime Minister of the State of Palestine who has joined us on the podium. We also acknowledge His Excellency Madam Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and who is also one of the Africans most known in this in the Commission. So welcome. So it's an immense privilege to invite His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, to deliver his statement. Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency,
Eccellenza João Lourenço,
Chairperson of the African
Presidente
Union,
uscente dell'Unione Africana, Eccellenza
Giorgia
Meloni,
Republic of Italy,
Presidente del Consiglio
Your
della Repubblica
Excellencies,
Italiana,
Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Mahmoud Ali Youssouf, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Madam Amina, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, former heads of state and government present, distinguished ministers, ambassadors, diplomats, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you to Ethiopia, a land where human origins are traced, where time is measured differently, where coffee was first shared with the world, a place where deep history, proven resilience, and bold ambition for Africa's future converge. Today, as Africa gathers at a defining moment, we recognize that our continent's most strategic asset is not only what we extract, but what we design, build, and govern. Progress is achieved when vision is translated into systems and ideas into lasting institutions. As we build on the African Water Vision 2025, we reflect on a simple truth. Water is more than a resource. It is a foundation of development, innovation, and stability. It shapes our cities, our farms, our health, and our peace. Here in Ethiopia, we have learned that responsible water management is central to guiding development wisely. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam now powers homes and industry, exports electricity to neighboring countries, and shows how African ingenuity can drive shared prosperity. Across Africa, rivers can become engines of stability when governed for shared benefit. On our land, targeted policy and innovation have enabled with self-sufficiency, and large-scale industrial investments are moving us from dependency to production. Excellencies, today, many African economies are among the fastest growing in the world. Projections show that Africa's growth will be on par, if not above, that of Asia. This is a rare convergence in modern economic history. In Ethiopia, we expect growth of 10.2% by the end of this year. Over the next 25 years, we aim to move from a low-income economy to a globally competitive one, anchored in productivity, industrialization, innovation, and quality jobs. Yet, growth alone is not enough. Our greatest wealth is our people. By 2035, Africa will add more young people to the global workforce than the rest of the world combined. This demographic reality must be harnessed with purpose. Numbers alone will not deliver prosperity. That's why we are investing in maternal and child health, expanding early childhood education, and scaling school feeding programs. Every child must arrive at school nourished, ready to learn, and prepare to contribute. We also strongly believe development must include all. Across Ethiopia, urban and rural areas are being transformed, designed to be green, human-centered, and resilient. Excellencies, in Addis Ababa, riverside renewal has transformed degraded waterways into clean, vibrant public spaces, reducing flood risk, restoring dignity, and strengthening community life. As Africa's urban landscape expands rapidly, we must be intentional. The African city of the future is walkable, green, youth-centered, and grounded in dignity and belonging. In rural areas, modernization is enhancing livelihoods, connecting communities to markets. This integrated approach links development with climate stewardship. One expression of this is the Green Legacy Initiative. We have planted more than 48 billion trees, restoring ecosystems and building a living legacy for future generations. Yet, the global development pathway has come at immense environmental cost, costs borne by communities far beyond those responsible. Therefore, climate action must be anchored in justice and equity, aligning finance, technology, and partnership to enable Africa to thrive. In this spirit, we hosted the second Africa Climate Summit, and we are preparing to host COP32, ensuring Africa speaks with one voice and presents solutions to the globe. This same principle of integration guides our technological transformation. Under Digital Ethiopia 2030, we're building digital public infrastructure that places citizens at the center of service delivery. By linking FIDA, our national digital ID, with payment systems and the massive data exchange, we enable secure access to services, seamless transactions, and responsible data sharing, fostering trust and driving our economy forward. In 2020, Ethiopia established Africa's first artificial intelligence institute. Building on this foundation, we are preparing to launch an AI university anchored in the Ethiopian philosophy of Madamer, synergy through purposeful collaboration. This institution will unite human values with machine intelligence, local context with global relevance, and scientific rigor with applied impact. It will ensure technology drives growth and position Africa as a global contributor in the age of intelligence. Ethiopia is also continuing to invest in connectivity. Through Ethiopian Airlines, we connect people, link markets, and move goods. To sustain this momentum, we are building Africa's largest airport, a next-generation gateway that will anchor our continent in global value chain. Beyond aviation, Ethio Telecom is expanding across Africa, bridging the digital divide and linking our continent's future through strategic partnerships. Yet, connectivity must be complete. For a nation like Ethiopia, with over 130 million people, sustainable growth requires diversified access. Ensuring reliable access to the sea through peaceful cooperation is fundamental to our economic future and to long-term stability and prosperity in the Horn of Africa. Excellencies, We meet at a moment of profound global transition. In this era of uncertainty, Africa's strengths will lie in a union that is confident and united. As we approach the African Union Silver Jubilee,